prosecutor. She used to work here. She helped put this store together, so she'll always be a part of it. Her name is Katherine Noble. She's a poet and lifelong Texan. She's a first-year fellow at the Michener Center for Writers and is a recipient of the Keene Prize in Literature, the George H. Mitchell Prize, and the Roy Crane Award in Creative Writing. Katherine.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for John putting this together and for Julie and Sam. I'm actually reading fiction tonight. I was sick of all my poems. So this is a short story that I wrote this semester, and instead of reading the whole thing, it's too long, I'm going to read some excerpts. As a poet trying to write fiction, the story has no plot, so it's pretty lateral. It's about a woman on her 60th birthday, and she's reflecting on her childhood and the links she sees between her upbringing and her children's. It's called Moving from Cheer to Joy, from Joy to All, and that's a line from a Randall Gerald poem called Next Day, about an older woman thinking about her life. All right. The houses in our neighborhood stood in a straight row, 12 to a block, painted white, yellow, and the priciest ones a brick facade. They looked like the McDonald's Happy Meals my children pleaded for decades later, full of fragrant, greasy dreams that grew tepid quickly. Low-pile sunken dens were riddled with plastic toys, pipe smoke, and the constant black and white cartoons. Low-lit kitchens trafficked nearly all day, centered around oilcloths, metallic appliances, radios tuned in hit parade, lacquered fatty meats for supper time, and countless coiffed women at sink windows, letting the hot water run, privately negotiating with their own reflection, not once peering at the street outside. I could smell the fish frying from far down the street, which was true any time my mother cooked, because she made such large batches of meat in adjacent slow cookers. The kitchen windows, sliding doors were open, air bright and suggestive. My mother, huge and bare arms with pins in her hair, until the moment before her guests arrived, would be mumbling, wiping her sweaty armpits with a kitchen cloth, which she would later use to dry the pots. She rocked back and forth between yellow cutting boards and the yellow stovetop and blue squat heels, dropping flour fillets into drums of suckling lard. My sisters would pout while opening cans of beets and industrial bags of coleslaw. My mother asked us to do something, we did it without question, no matter how tedious the job. I always got stuck shining the silver or taking my grandmother out on walks in her wheelchair, while she nonchalantly passed gas and berated neighborhood boys on roller skates for roller skating on the sidewalk. I spent years coaxing patina from gravy boats and pewter creamers until some garish variation of my face shone back at me. My mother's arms and cheeks were plush and cold like raw chicken. She habitually dusted the pits of her body, followed by a generous coating on her face and neck with a powdered pillow after her bath. In almost 50 years, I never heard her play music. She only laughed in the lobby at Mass. A whole flock of heavy mothers scrambled down the nave like the drawbridge out of a hen house, clucking and preening for biblical wisdom, aphorisms, and lunch dates from Father Perry, whom God had bestowed a full shock of hair, even in late middle age. My father was bald and lean with perfectly coiled anger tucked behind the spot on his chest he rubbed when losing patience. He spent most of his off time playing poker at Uncle Nick's or drinking with him on our front porch where the kids weren't allowed to loiter, unless it was a Saturday afternoon. My father didn't talk to daughters. There were 3 of us girls sandwiched between 2 gangly and spiritually agitated boys. The oldest died just before his 20th birthday in Vietnam. He was smoking a cigarette, probably not thinking about anything for a few coveted minutes. Then a grenade whistled. They do whistle, don't they? I was 18, thankfully out of the house, when the notifying officer knocked in his olive sequin suit of armor. I saw on TV once that Harry Houdini died after being sucker punched backstage. The greatest magician died surprise. My mother, great illusionist of matriarchal control, was sucker punched by God or death or whoever's in charge of that kind of thing, and never caught the breath. The heft of my body gave my voice authority like my mother's. Over the years, I've stood at the mirror and watched myself expand and expand, although I have tried everything to reduce and take aerobics classes at the YMCA. I only eat sugar-free pudding and strawberries for dessert. I avoid the mirror and recently threw away all my clothes from my 30s and 40s, which I kept as cruel inspiration. Who did I need to be thin for now? My daughter Sandy is the closest thing I can think of. But Sandy must look at me in panic, wonder how she can avoid being my shadow in 30 years. I've always known that their compliance to my whims involved pity, that old wet-eyed house pet. At times I use this to my advantage. I get them to come visit me from the city and drive me to the old Opry and dinners at the Italian buffet I love, but they say taste like cans of Chef Boyardee. I convinced Sandy to come home for Thanksgiving for 10 days last year under the guise of helping me cook, although we order all the large dishes from a cafeteria. I don't even remember the argument, though surely some occurred. I was so happy watching daytime television with her, getting our nails painted days before her cousins arrived. It's hard for me to relate to Sandy's narratives about her rotating girlfriends, backpacking trips, online dating services. I married a medical equipment engineer, nervous and hesitant to speak of anything but mechanics. We quickly uprooted to the suburbs of St. Louis. We met when I taught 6th grade after college. I never really dated. The children and I were touring the hospital, talking to a nurse about x-rays and pointing out the bones they'd memorized on plastic skeletons. Steve was in the corner of the immaculate overlit room, pacing around an MRI machine, gently removing screws and studying the gaping drum like a mortician inspecting coffins. His starched sleeves were rolled, his sneakers untied. Unlike my father, Steve's build was compact and wide-handed, with a full blonde beard. He laughed at the boys when they howled at the x-ray of a fractured coccyx, stringing together all the lewd references they had the vocabulary for, before I threatened they'd lose recess. We made eye contact and he winked, offering to show the class how an MRI is taken. He took me to dinner a week later. That was the last time I could truly distinguish myself from Steve, the last time I could stand in front of him and study his face without also seeing my own. Looking back, we were different selves. I think about the engagement, the wooden box he carved with our initials, the thrill of 2 awfully happy bodies touching in front of a gold altar, the priest incarnating God into wine like a 3-hour Vegas special, slow dancing and laughing as he stepped on my white shoes again and again. The hotel of days those early years, endless doors to open, us together, stupid, forgiving, everything, even the perfect parts that set the bar irrevocably high. Then we had children. Then we watched and watched. At times from the same corner of the same room, and many times we watched separately, unable to reach one another. We continued watching. They grew and we trudged through the tundra of middle age, pulling at each other's sleeves, reconnecting once and again to make a plan, to encourage, to panic. Now where are we? Today I'm 60, he a year older. Who can prepare you? There's a poem I still think about now and again. I can't remember the poet's name, but we read it in high school in an English class. The poet, a man, talks from the perspective of an abandoned older woman with nothing left exciting for her. She is shopping and finds herself begging for the bag boy to look at her. He doesn't. Her age drapes like a silk black burqa across her face. The poem horrified me when I read it. I thought for the first time about the silence that comes for every woman. Maybe that is the other end of this tundra. After a while, you stop hearing the wind at all. Unlike my siblings and I, my children have long assumed that I am that sort of lonely woman. Michael, who we privately refer to as our Gethsemane son because of his constantly knitted brow and impassioned demeanor, always treated me that way, overly affectionate and patronizing, as though I were his offspring. He's never needed his mother openly. He always pats me on the head and says, "Oh, mother," then asks me about vacation plans, retirement funds, and retires to the guest room to attend to more important thoughts. He tells me to update the kitchen, to change the curtains we hung when he was a child to make the house feel fresh again. How do you tell your adult son that you were first the adult, with wisdom, with intuition, and a mortal coil existing outside of him and his lifespan? I remember the first time I knew my son's intellect was surpassed mine. I looked into the rear mirror while driving him home from some Disney movie when he was 2 years old. He was sticking out his pink little tongue over and over again and sucking it back into his puckered lips. "What are you doing?" I asked him, thinking it was some mimic from the movie I didn't remember. My brain is a mailbox and my tongue is a letter someone is sending. What 2-year-old thinks like that? A couple of summers later, Michael asked me about Jesus. Sandy was still a silent baby, past 2 and speaking late, a curse that followed all her life. We'd sent him to vacation Bible school out of habit. No, tradition is a better word, since Steve and I were not in the habit of feeling spiritual or convicted or anything voodoo like that. But the Catholic Church is the Catholic Church, a non-negotiable. Who wants to worry in their later years whether they've done all they could to keep their children out of hell, however hell manifests? Not me. So of course he went to vacation Bible school. They had watched a movie about the life of Christ. I don't know what possessed the teachers to show a classroom of young children such a brutish description of mankind. They didn't show him dying or being whipped or whatever agony one imagines Jesus enduring. But the animation mentioned that he was nailed to a cross, you know. So he asked me about it, and I explained it in brief, telling him it happened a long time ago, and that God showed people what it meant to sacrifice themselves. How inane, I thought, trying to explain sacrifice to a toddler. That night I found sweet, complicated Michael in his room on his knees, tracing something on the ground with his finger. "What are you doing?" I asked. I felt as though I was always asking Michael what he was doing as a child, his actions so enigmatic and inward to an adult observer. "I'm writing God a letter telling him sorry I killed him being bad." I should have stopped him right there, corrected the notion, told him it was all a mistake and a method of shame or control or groupthink, founded by a cruel man in some kind of repression. But like I said, the Catholic Church makes you feel like you're always being watched. Panopticonic, like prisoners who never know if there's a guard in the tower, so they must always be on their best behavior. Instead I said, "You don't have any paper to write a letter." Michael looked at me as if I were stupid, a 4-year-old thinking their mother is stupid. How did I survive? Why would God need my letter to be on paper? People need paper, because their eyes are small and in their heads, but God's aren't, so he can see inside the invisibles. The crucifixion is disgusting. I'm not sure who came up with the idea, but I don't know we have to look at God skinny and dead as a strung-up buck every time we want a peaceful hour in church. Sorry. Sandy, in contrast, bore the splintered cross of beauty and simplicity as a child. Well before kindergarten, she understood she was the most beautiful girl in her room. I watched in horror and reflexive pride as her blue eyes scanned crowds at sugared birthdays, church events, and shopping malls to size herself against every other girl. No one in her family has blue eyes, heart-shaped lips, or such a beneficially slight frame. Who teaches a girl to place her isolated body parts on a stage with the body parts of her peers and then employ a rubric? When I was young, if I ever compared myself to neighbor girls or classmates, it was out of self-loathing, not power. But maybe those are two ends of a line that curves back to kiss. We traveled to the Bahamas when Sandy was 7 and stayed at an all-inclusive resort for her anniversary. We'd all bought new sunglasses and swimsuits for the occasion. I was 39 and knew my body was at the point of no return. I packed a red one-piece from Dillard's, the back dipping to nearly my tailbone, and I felt beautiful and exotic the whole first day. Then Steve started snapping unposed photographs of me splayed beneath the beach umbrella and splashing up to my knees in the cold ocean. Custard thighs and veined underarms, like the wife of a Kentucky preacher waving hallelujah. Sandy wouldn't get her hair wet on the beach or in the hotel pool. She swam the whole week, treading water with her blonde hair in twin buns like a buoyant koala. On our last day, I went to her room to hurry Sandy to breakfast. I found her standing in front of the full-length mirror, sucking her tiny child's stomach in and out from the center of her neon bikini with fish sponge painted across the spandex. She paused, then spun slowly, watching her taut tan limbs with animated, unforgiving eyes. She smiled. In those moments, I saw a flash of something decayed inside my own child. I wouldn't say it if it were not true. When I was in 8th grade, my father was stationed in D.C. for a year. I enrolled in public school in Bethesda. Martha Hedgeman was the most popular girl there, her father running the local bank. I never spoke to her or her gaggle of friends, being new, possessing buck teeth, preternaturally large breasts, and an out-of-fashion haircut. I received a note halfway through the spring asking me to meet them after school at the movie theater next to the J.C. Penney's. Marcy considered this her office, sitting in the far right corner of the theater with 4 or 5 of her friends every day from 3 to 5:30 when they picked up the local bus. Instead of the plebeian school bus home, they talked through the matinee, using the background noise and darkness as a cloak of secrecy for gossip. That day, Marcy and all her friends had ice cream cones. They introduced themselves as the previews began, their face silver and exaggerated in the odd light. I couldn't recognize any of them. They said they'd see me in the halls and thought I was pretty. I blushed, surely. I'm not sure what I would have said in response. They asked what I liked to do for fun as the 50-foot heroine brushed her wavy hair, an overture unwound through the movie speakers. I'd never been asked that before. I said I liked horses, and that I'd ridden at a stable in San Antonio before moving that summer. How interesting, they all agreed. I felt confident, talked more about the Pinto, about the barrels I wove with the third fastest time in the region. The violin music returned as the heroine met the male lead in the soda shop. Marcy touched my corduroy jacket near the yellow smiley face patch, mewing, "How cute," as her soft pink fingertips rubbed the fabric together. I talked about Girl Scouts and how I loved to sew fringe and patches on my jeans. I volunteered my sewing machine, saying we could make dresses. I told them all that, I think. They agreed that that too was a promising future for all of us, although at a certain point only Marcy was turned to me. The other girls falling into the romance of the movie. Marcy handed me an extra ice cream cone. Friendship seemed so simple, and I seemed so deserving. I wanted it for the rest of my life. This group constantly enveloping you, making you disappear in the movie dark, all whispering that you were interesting and known. Perfect euthanasia, with violins, cola, laundered and ironed hair spread across your folded arms. I wanted to tell them everything I had ever thought. They all bit into their ice cream, too brash to shyly lick their cream globe. They all giggled and watched me with blushed, freckled cheeks and unrefined virgin eyes. So I bit into mine, grinning and powerful. My face contorted and I doubled over and spit up on my jeans out of reflex. The ice cream cone was filled with 2 scoops of cold lard. I ran out of the theater, my face greasy and betrayed, as the heroine threw herself onto a floral duvet to sob out some solvable injustice. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm like in a trance now. It's like I could listen to that story again, but I know it's late now.
But yeah, not too late for more ice cream, more hanging
Yeah.
out. Check out that table in the back, and thanks so much to everyone for coming out. Thank you so much to our readers. And our next ice cream social is not going to be on the 4th Friday like it usually is. It's going to be
3 weeks.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be on March 18th, and it's South by week, so it's a
We have a real rock star that's going to come and sing for us too, so I'm really excited. But yeah, we're going to have some really great readers. 3 weeks, walk over, it'll be South by, so maybe ride a bike or something.
yeah. All right, cool. So please hang out and come talk to us.